Hey guys, I don't know why I needed to give my name to get into the meeting. Does anyone know why that happened? Did it happen to everyone over here?
No.
Not to me.
It's not good. No? Okay.
Good morning, Rabbi. I think that you log in with a different account today.
Okay.
That because I'm seeing your name with a different color today instead of the picture.
Okay. Okay, all right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Nun. We're going to quickly review the case that we had in the Mishnah on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis. We're going to chazer the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. So let's begin with that. The Mishnah spoke about a person who was unable to reach his home before Shabbos. The Mishnah introduces a new type of Eruv Tchumen, and that is that if a person is heading towards his home, and let's say just for example, we're going to give the max, the greatest amount of space in which this can work. A person is 4,000 amas away from his home, happens to be that there is a tree that he knows of, there's a landmark that he knows of that's exactly in between where he is and his home. The landmark is 2,000 amas away from him, not more. Perfect. The home is 2,000 amas away from the landmark and not more. The person can declare that my Markim Shavisa is at the landmark, and as long as he specifies exactly where at the landmark, in other words, he narrows it down to a specific 4 amas, that declaration will affect his Eruv, his Markim Shavisa, to be at the landmark. And now it's perfect. He can walk 2,000 amas to his landmark. He can walk from his landmark another 2,000 amas and he can go home. That's good. The Mishnah's Adesha was where the person made such a declaration, but he left it without giving the specific place at the landmark. So the case of the Mishnah, there's a tree. And let's just, for the sake of argument, that the space under the tree is 8 amas or 12 amas or however many more amas. In other words, under the tree, meaning if you include the space of the trunk, the branches of one side, the branches of the other side. So when the person says, my Markim Shavisa is under the tree, well, which side of the tree? It can be this 4 amas or those 4 amas, or maybe yet another 4 amas. So the Mishnah says, Lo yamar klum, lo yamar klum. Comes along the Gemara, and the Gemara tells us, Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Rav says, Lo yamar klum means that it was b'chlal not effective. His Markim Shvisa is not by the tree. And then we learned another detail. Not is it not by the tree, but since he did not intend to make his current location as his Markim Shvisa, had he done so, he would have at least had 2,000 amas from where he is. But he rejected that. He wanted his Markim Shavisa to be by the tree. So it's called Kareach Mikan v'Kareach Mikan. You're bold here and you're bold there. You only have the Aladams. So understands it out. Shmuel says no. Shmuel says that true, we don't know which 4 amas under the tree is his Markim Shavisa. And we have to always be machmer. Always be machmer means is that if from one side of under the tree, there is more than 2,000 amas to his house, we have to say, well, maybe that is exactly where his Markim Shavisa took place. So lo yamar klum, he can go to his house. He can go to his house, but he can go until the tree. And whenever you're going to measure from the tree, you always have to measure in the most chamerdik way because we don't know where it went into effect, but it did go into effect. That's where we left off. Now the Gemara on Daf Nun will give us 2 fundamental understandings, Bishitas Rav. Rav that says, Lo yamar klum, it b'chlal did not go into effect. Why is that? And the second explanation the Gemara will give on Daf Nun is going to be a concept that's not connected to Eruv, and it's going to be really a Shas Sugya. And the word is, the theme is that kol she'enoi b'zeh achar zeh, afilu babas achas enoi, which means that any legal situation that cannot take effect consecutively, as we'll give various examples, then it cannot even take effect simultaneously. And we'll speak out that klal when we learn the Gemara. And because of this second understanding in Rav, connecting his din in Tchumen to this larger question, to this larger rule that he subscribes to, of kol she'enim b'zeh achar zeh, we're going to challenge that rule. We're going to challenge the rule from dinim and ma'aser be'ema. We're going to challenge this rule from dinim and ma'aser rishon. We're going to challenge this din from lachmei toida. But ultimately, we're going to allow this din to stand. And interestingly, just a few daf ago, we were having klali halacha. The klali halacha that the Gemara spoke about was when certain tanoim argue as a klal who we paskin like. We're going to learn in daf nun amud beis another interesting klal in halacha, even though it's not written explicitly, but it's about amoyrayim. And that is, remember we learned Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, normally the halacha is like Rabbi Yechanan. Here we're going to learn that Chizkiah and Rabbi Yechanan, generally the halacha is going to be like Chizkiah, because Chizkiah was Rabbi Yechanan's teacher. And finally, on Daf Nun Amud Beis, we're going to go into a new case, and that is where an eruv was placed in two opposite directions. In other words, the person didn't place one eruv. Erroneously, the person placed two eruvim, and we'll see what sort of effect will that have on this person's ability to walk. We're going to review the concept of chamor, gamol, and a lot more. So we left off on Daf Nun mamash on top of the Amid. So Nachamol, we had in the case where the person did not specify where under the tree. The Mishnah says that if a person made that declaration, lo yomar klum, on that the Rav says, lo yomar klum, kol ikir, not like Shmuel that says where we don't know where under the tree. So we're machmir, but it's somewhere under the tree. No, it's not under the tree at all. So Amar Rabba, now we'll try to understand what's the logic behind Rav. My Tamid Rav, right, that he doesn't acquire, not only nowhere, there's no Makom Shvisa. So explanation number one is Mishum Deloy Misayim Asrei, because since the area of his Makom Shvisa was not defined, like let's speak, even if under the tree there are 8 amas, 4 and 4, he said under the tree. We don't know which 4. It's not clear, says Rashi. Right at the end of the top of the wide lines, at the end of the 4th line from the top of the Amid, Bishum Deloy Sayim Asrei. He didn't define it, and that's the klal that Rab holds. The kivin Deloy Sayim. If you don't define a place, Leikane Leimide. Certain things, right? We don't say doubt. Well, you were not defined, so maybe if it's a doubt, then it doesn't go into effect at all. It's either is or it's not. You have a Makom Shvisa, where is it? If it's not clear, you don't have it at all. Now, now we're starting a whole sugya, and we're going to really go away from ERUVIN for Amid. This is going to be very geschmack over here. That Amar Rabba, same in Rabba, just another version of what Rabba said, Bishitas Rav. That might have the Rav, Mishum de Kosovar, because Rav subscribes to the following rule, Kol she'enoi bozeh achar zeh, whatever legal situation cannot take effect consecutively, whatever legal situation cannot take consecutively, so then afilu bebas achas enoi, it cannot even take effect simultaneously. In other words, when he says, I want my Makom Shvisa to take place under the tree, Rav understands that we should take his words literally. We should take his words that he wants the entirety of under the tree. He wants all of the area under the tree to be his Makom Shvisa. So if under the tree is 8 amas or 12 amas or whatever amount of amas, he wants all of it to be his Makom Shvisa. That cannot go into effect. Why not? Because what would have happened had he declared, I want my Makom Shvisa first to go into effect in Dalad amas to the north under the tree, and then it should go into the other daladamas in the south of the tree. First one area and then in another area. And we all know that when it comes to an Eid of Tchumen, you only get to make one Makom Shvisa, either where you're standing or by your Tchum. You can't do 2. So had he made a declaration that he wants first one part of the tree to be his residence and then the other, even if he would have said he wants one to go into effect right after the other, but bezeh achar zeh, right, that would not take effect, because it's going to be the first one. It's going to be the one that was Yomakam Shvisa, whether it is Soif HaYom, whether it is Tchilas HaYom, whatever the time is, the time important, that and that's it. So even though your intent by saying under the tree, that's the way Rabbah understands, is you want all of the under the tree. You want the whole 8 Amos. You want every place under the tree to be Yomakam Shvisa. It can't go into effect. It's only one place. It doesn't matter. Had you declared Bezeh Achar Zeh, it wouldn't have worked. So now that you clear it together, it also does not work. That's a
What does it have to do with Elon? You can always say it. Like,
it has to do with Elon or a Gadir, because these are areas that are covering double, at least double or more than 4 Amos. No, in other words, that's the whole thing in the Mishnah. The fence is, let's say, just give it 8 Amos long. All right? So when you specify the 4 Amos closer to me, the 4 Amos to the Tzafin, or the 4 Amos to the Darim, you gave a Makam Shvisa. If you said by the fence, you meant the whole thing, 8 Amos. Well, why? So why can't you make your Makam Shvisa in 8 Amos? Because had you said first 4 north and then 4 in the south, it wouldn't have worked. So therefore, it doesn't work b'bas achas. Now, guys, let me just, to appreciate this klal and the challenges that the Rishonim have, this is not only discussed over here. For example, in Kedushin, there's a Tosfos that asks the following question. There's a big Tosfos here also. But in Kedushin, Tosfos says like this. Guys, we know that Ein Isur Chalal Isur. These are big klolim and shas. Ein Isur Chalal Isur. But there's exceptions to that. I'll give you an example. When one's brother gets married, what's the Isur of one's brother's wife, right? If REUVIN marries Rachel, if God forbid Shimon has a relation with this Rachel, what is he violating? So for starters, Eishes Ach and Eishes Ish. Ein Isur Chalal Isur. Remember that, guys? But we say, no. Ein Isur Chalal Isur, if it's Bezeh Achar Zeh. The Bas Achas, it could be Chal. That mamash goes against what we're learning right now, just to appreciate what we're learning about. But sometimes we find that if something cannot be Chal Bezeh Achar Zeh, which is the whole sugya of Ein Isur Chalal Isur, I know there's Isur Koilel and there's Isur Moisav. Aside of that, one of the exceptions is the Bas Achas. Yes, 2 Isurim can be Chal together. Here we're saying mamash the opposite, that if something cannot be Chal Bezeh Achar Zeh, it cannot be Chal Bas Achas. Tosfos or Tosfos Rid says in Kedushin, it depends. If the Isur is coming from the Hashem, from the Oibishter, then it could be Chal Bas Achas. But here we're speaking about something that we are affecting. We are creating a legal residence. If it's coming from a person, then we subscribe to the rule of Rabbah. Just mentioning that just opens up the mind to chat that we're touching on a gewaldige topic. Okay, now my benaya between these 2 explanations, or these 2 versions of Rabbah, these 2 explanations, B'shitas Rav, the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the nafkamina. Ike benaya. The Amar, when he says, Liknu li ba'arba amas migoy shmoina, he explicitly says, he was vague. He didn't tell you which part from under the tree, but he says only 4. 4, there's 8 amas under the tree. 4 of them will be my Makam Shvisa. So if the issue is the first version of Rabbah, if Rav says that if you are not precise at the location, it cannot be Chal. Well, you did not clarify which 4 amas. So none of it went into effect. And if the reason of Rav is because you intended for all of the 8 amas to be your Makam Shvisa, and since you cannot do 4 and then 4, so the 8 is not Chal, here you said you only want 4. Right? Uman the Aman Mishum Kol She'enu Zachazaz. Here, no, Ka'arba Amas Dami. Right? Here you're designating 1 Arba Amas. The Hacharba Amas coming, and it will be Chal. Now it will be Chal, but which one? Tzas and Darim. Oh, here Rav will hold like we learned yesterday in Shul. We don't know. And if we don't know, we got to be Machmer. Right? So if your house is more than 2,000 amas from the northern part from under the tree, then we have to say, well, maybe it was Chal in the northern part and you can't make it home. But you can make it until 4 amas before your home. No, it's chalvir, but we have to always, whichever direction you're going, we have to give it the most chamurdika scenario, giving you the least amount of space to walk. But still, it will be chal. Okay. And now, like we mentioned, we're going to go away from ERUVIN, and we're going to challenge the rule of Rabbah of Kol She'ena B'Zach Hazeh, Afilu B'Bas Achas, also Einoi. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Malachenu Sha'ar Kol Yom V'Dvarim.
Amen.
All right, Gufa. Amar Rabbah. Kol Dover She'enoi B'Zach Hazeh, Afilu B'Bas Achas, Einoi. Fragt die Gemara Eisvei Abai Le Rabbah. We have a Braisa. Hamar B'Maisrois. Unlike Truma, where the Torah did not give you an amount, and even after the Chazal said 1 of 40, 1 of 50, 1 of 60, if you decide to give to the Kohen, I don't know, 80% of what you have, gesundte hate. When it comes to Ma'aser Rishon, it may not be that way. You have to give exactly 10% to the Levi. Now, what happens after you gave the Truma? Right after you gave the Truma, let's say right now you have 100 apples. After the Truma, how much do you have to give to the Levi? 10 apples. A person goes ahead and he gives 20 apples. He was marbe b'maisros. So what happens? You gave 20 apples. So the Braisa says the following. The 80 apples that remain is good. Peiroisov, the remaining 80 misukanim. Why? Because from the 20 that you gave, yesh b'chlal masayim mana. 10 is to the Levi. Problem is, what happens to the 20 that you separated? You cannot give more than 10%, which means that from the 20 apples that you took, how many of them are really Ma'aser Rishon? Only 10. What will be the other 10? Now, guys, this is a big sugya. I'm just saying the words of the Rishonim, and we'll discuss this. We're going to go through this other times. The other 10 is still considered tevel, because you took it out of the 80. It didn't remain. So really, in the 20 now, there's a mixture of 10 Ma'aser Rishon and 10 tevel. So what happens when you have such a mixture? You can't do anything with it. Umasroisov amikul kolam, because it's a mixture of tevel and Ma'aser Rishon. End of Braisa. Now here comes the kasha. The kasha amai is, why are the 80 good? Why are the 80 good? Why are the peiros of misukanim? Why don't we say the rule of Rabbah, also Einoi? What's the question over here? Says Rashi Gavaldik. What were to happen? Rashi is a little bit under the height of the Gemara now. The ilu have a mafresh meiser kilchasik. If the person would have separated 10 apples to the Levi, and then he would have separated the other 10, and he would have said, this other 10 is Ma'aser Rishon. You know what that would mean? 0. The 10 to the Levi is perfect, and the other 10 is Le'omar Klum, right? Le'chayil. The second designation would not be chal at all. So think about it. So now that you did it the basachas, you took out 20 together, based on Rabbah's rule, kol she'ena b'zeh hazeh. So then it should b'chlal not be chal on the 20. Nothing should be chal. And since nothing should be chal, so the remaining 80 apples are still tevel regarding Ma'aser Rishon. This l'chayra goes against the rule of Rabbah. Answers the Gemara, no. When I separate 20 apples, there is a way for me to separate 20 apples, and it's going to be a bona fide act of separating Ma'aser. You know why? Because I'm not obligated to give the whole apple to the Levi. I'm allowed to separate 20 apples and say that half of each of these 20 apples are Ma'aser Rishon. Now, it doesn't help the Levi because he's going to have in each apple half Ma'aser Rishon and half tevel, because he's separated together. But the peirosav will be misukanim. Let's read it inside. Shana Ma'aser the Isa lachatzoyin. You could say that half of every kernel, not the whole thing, is Ma'aser. The other half is not. The Omar Tigdoish Palga the Chitza. Each half of every kernel of wheat should become holy, whichever designation you're doing it for. The rule is that kacha, it functions, it goes into effect. Now, just to contrast it with our case of tchumen. By tchumen, you have to designate an entire uninterrupted 4 amas. You can't say, well, I'm taking an 8 amma area, and half a amma is my markem. Doesn't work that way. Your markem shvis is one chunk of 4 ammas. So therefore, so basically over there, since there is a way of separating 20 apples to be misaken the peiroisov, even though you didn't do it here, even though you didn't say half of each apple, nevertheless, it will go into effect. Next question. Hey, okay, let's go to Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema means that if a person has cattle, remember, sheep or goats born into your own herd, that year, each year on its own year, in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, we'll learn the Rosh Hashanah from Meiser Behema. Then you gather them in a pen, and there has to be dafka narrow exit way, and you have to pass each one out, and you count them, and when you come to the 10th, you declare that the 10th is holy to God, and you smear the back with red ink, with a red paint, and that's Meiser Behema, which, by the way, belongs to you, but you have to take it and offer it as it's like a kachem kalim shlamim, but it's a holy. It becomes kachem. Now you cannot have 2 animals leave the pen and say half of each is meiser. That cannot happen. Okay, so now Meiser Behema doles lechatzoyin, another din by Meiser Behema. If the 9th one goes out and you say the 9th, and the 10th one goes out and you say this is the 10th, and when the 11th one go out, you say this is the 10th. You said the first 10th correctly, and then when the 11th, you were magdish it again as the 10th. Also, the 11th will be nothing. You had no effect. Once you gave the 10th, that's it. Which there is no Meiser Behema in the way that I just described. If you counted 1, 2, 3, etc. correctly, you corrected the 9th as the 9th, you counted the 10th as the 10th. Then if the next one came out, you said, you know what, I'm getting another Meiser Behema. Nachamal Asiri Yer Kodesh, the second statement doesn't work. There is no B'zeh Charzeh. And nevertheless, V'amar Rabba, or we have here on the side, V'amar Rabba, that if when the 10th one was to leave the pen, not one left, 2 animals left together, B'bas Achas, Yatzu Shnayim Ba'asiri, and you declared B'bas Achas on both that Asiran, the Koren Asiran, the Koren Asiri. So the din is that what? That your statement goes into effect on one, doesn't go into effect on both. It goes into effect on one. Not only doesn't go into effect on one, but the other one becomes holy as a shlamim, and now you have yourself a typical challenge that we're going to learn a lot in Kachim. What happens if you have 2 different karbanos, meaning one is Meiser Behema and one is a shlamim, and there are many rules in which they are different one from the other. So then you're going to have to shecht and offer each one using the chumras of both. So then asiri v'achadasar muravim b'zeh. Now you have yourself to know what your declaration went into effect. Not, you cannot make both Meiser Behema, but one is Meiser Behema and one becomes a normal shlamim animal. And quickly, just a couple of, I'm reading inside the Rashi just to read Chazar a few dinim in Kachim. Uma bein shlamim lemeiser. This is in the height of the Gilyon Hashas. Shashlamim, only shlamim. They need smicha. The owner, if the owner is a man, he has to lean on the head of the animal right before the shechita. You have to add to it mesachim, the libations. You have to wave the chazay and the shoik. If there is a blemish, they have to be redeemed. Remember, Meiser Behema belongs to the owner. That means if it gets blemished, he doesn't have to redeem it. But shlamim has to be redeemed. And if you declare a tmura, the tmura is also going to be offered. Masha Enkin, by Meiser Behema, none of the dinim that we mentioned go into effect. So Vahashta de Koren B'bas Achas, and your declaration worked. How did it work? You made one Meiser Behema and one shlamim, and now they're mixed. So then, bo tarvayu, you have to do tunufas chazei v'shoik. They both need smicha. You remember, both needing smicha is not so pashit, because if an animal is not obligated to have smicha, then you're being mishtamish with kachim. That's the whole sugya, whether women can do smicha. But anyways, let's just read the Rashi. And Rashi adds, V'libi oimer, a nice lashon, because there is a bracha made before these actions, but if you're doing it nisafek, the leila heavy bracha levatala. And by nisachim, you only bring one set of nisachim, and you make a stipulation. And v'chuli, look inside the continuation of Rashi. But what do we see from all this? That your statement worked. Now, let's use Rabba's klal. If you would have declared the 10th, and then the 11th, 10th, the second declaration would be nothing. So why is it that if you do it the basachas, why doesn't it go into effect? Answers the Gemara, shiny meiser behema, because there is a case, the isay bezachas evatos. There is a case that bezachas will go into effect. The Tanach, like we learned, and this Mishnah is brought many times, that if you call the 9th the 10th, not the 9th the 9th, you call the 9th the 10th. It's really the 9th, and then you realized, oi, I called the 9th the 10th, but I didn't say 9. So now to rectify that, you called the 10th 9th. Now that you said the word 9, what number comes after 9? 10. So instead of you now picking up the pieces and going weiter from 11, you called the 11th 10th. So the 9th you call 10th, the 11th you call 10th, but the real 10th was what you called the 9th. So says the Mishnah, they are all holy. And what are the details? That the real 10th, even though you called it the 9th, that's the Meiser Behema. But the 9th and the 11th, they become Shlomim. Point is that there is a scenario where B'zeh Hazeh, one will become Meiser, the other will become Shlomim. That's why if you did the Bas Achas, 2 animals came out, and you called on both of them, these are the 10ths. That's why it's Chal, 1 Meiser Behema and 1 Shlomim. Next challenge. Or carbon toida, which is a type of Shlomim with restrictions. Toida can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Toida has to come with 40 loaves of bread, right? Made into 4 different types of loaves. 3 of them, 30 loaves, are as all of the grain karbanos, non-chametz. Actually, by a toida, 10 of the 40 are chametz. Later, you're going to get from each group of 10, 1 to the kohen. Now, you have to have 40 loaves of bread designated. Then when you shech the animal, those 40 become consecrated. You don't imbue them with kedusha. You designate them, and then they become mukdash when you shech them. What happens? Right? There's no case similar to the Meiser Behema case. So, for example, Rashi says, if a person designated 40 loaves of bread, right, let's look inside the Rashi, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid, you separated 40, and you made a mistake, and you forgot that you designated your 40. And you designated another 40. That second designation, Bechlal, does not go into effect. Loi kachi, because this is called Hegdish B'tos. Another example that Rashi gives. You designated 40 loaves of bread. You shechted the animal, so now they're already mugdash. And then you designated another 40 loaves of bread. Also, garnished. The second 40 loaves have no kiddush. There is never a case that even if there is a tos, that you can do 40 and then another 40. There's no bazeh hazeh. Let's go back on the Gemara. But nevertheless, the itmar, what we learned, the itmar is an opening to not a machlekes tanoim, but to amiroyim. If you from the beginning, one time, you separated 80, and now you shechted the animal, Chizkiah says, Kachu Allah mem mitoich shmeinim. 40 of the 80 are holy. It's not chal on all the 80, but it's chal on 40 of the 80. Rabbi Yechanan says, Loi Kachu Allah mem mitoich shmeinim. And the kasha is predicated on a klal, Chizkiah of Rabbi Yechanan halacha ki Chizkiah, who was his rabbi. So we can challenge Rabbi. Based on Chizkiah's ruling, your statement cannot function because the einoi b'zeh hazeh. And yes, there is bebas achas. This is the final challenge. Answers the Gemara. That's not a challenge as well, because for itmar Allah, either Amar Abzeda, or we have here from Kedushin, Amar Abishua ben Levi, that hakol moedim heichada Amar likatchu abayim teich shmoinim dekachi. If a person designated 80 loaves, but he said explicitly only 40 will become mukdash, why would you separate 80? Guys, in Kachim, we're going to learn a lot about the concept of achrayis. Right? Arba chatois, chamisha chatois mesois, but there are times that you designate lechatchila 2 animals because you say just in case one gets lost, just in case one will become invalidated, I already have the other. Same thing over here. If he designated 80, but he said I only want 40, everyone will hold that the 40 will take effect. Or the opposite. If he says clearly, I want all 80 to take effect, then none of them will become holy. You know why? That actually backs up the rule of Rabba. Because kol she'enoi bozeach hazeh, then afilu babasachas nama enoi fakert. You know where they argue? Ki pligi bistama. He didn't say clearly 40 out of the 80. He didn't say I only want a some zero, 80 or nothing. He said he's designated 80 and he shechted the animal. So Mar Sover, this is Chizkiyah, that his intent of designating 80 was not for all 80 to be chal. It was only la'achrayis komachaven. It's as if va'altrai asniu. It's as if he brought the 80 on the condition, which is the heres achaim. I already have 80, so just in case something happens with some of them, I already have a replacement. It's as if he said it. He's never being magdish all 80. That's why it's chal. Daf nun amud beis. And Omar Sover Rabbi Yechanan holds, no, that if he did not say 40 out of the 80, him designating 80 is to be understood, l'karbin gadol kamachaven, and we don't have 80, there is never 80. You know why you can never do 80? Because of the rule of Rabba. Kol she'ein b'zeh hazeh, afil b'basachas namay einoi givaldig. So now we did not refute the statement of Rabba, and we're back to two explanations, b'shitas Rav. Weiter, we're continuing, my friends, b'shitas Rav, that when does Rav say, now, according to some of the Rishonim, we're going to start focusing on the first explanation in Rav, that Rav holds that if you did not give a specific location, since it wasn't clear, specifically clear, it's not chal at all. We're only speaking about a tree that has underneath it 12 amas. 12 amas means that you have potentially 3 areas under the tree that could become your Markim Shvisa, 4, 4, and 4, and none of these 4 overlap the other. 12 allows you to spread them out. But if you have a tree, as long as it is a little bit less than 12, which means that if you were to designate 3 separate areas of 4, the middle 4 will overlap a little bit, side the 4 from the north and also the 4th from the south. True, this person did not specify which 4, which grouplet from under the tree will become his Makim Shavisa. But since the middle is an area that whichever one would have become his Makim Shvisa would have included the middle, so then we can say that the middle is his Makim Shvisa. Hare mixas beisoi is already nikar. Some of it we know, some of it is defined. Some of the middle is included. So since some of the middle is included, so then we can say that the whole middle becomes the daled amis by the trunk, by the middle becomes his makam shvis. So says Abaya. Now right away the Gemara challenges that. I don't get you. I don't get you. Listen, I acknowledge that the middle overlaps the north and the south, the one side and the other side. But who says he wanted to make the middle as Makim Shvisa? Let me say this by heart. What happens if this person Taka wanted for the north, for which the north is the left, for the left to become his Makim Shvisa? The 4 amas to the left does not overlap at all with the 4 amas to the south. It doesn't even touch it. Doesn't even touch it. So you don't know. Maybe it's north, maybe it's south. They don't overlap each other. It's not clear. And if it's not clear, that should be the rule of Rav, that whenever you don't define which place under the tree is your Markam Shvisa, then since it's not defined, none of it becomes your Markam Shvisa. Let's read it inside. Why are you looking at I know the center overlaps, but who says, why should you ignore the 4 middle ones? Dilma ba'arba, either the high gisa or barba the high gisa komisayim, and then there's no overlap. So therefore, we acknowledge the svara of Abaya, but in a different case. Our Mishnah, and therefore Shitas Rav, Ela be'ilan, that underneath it there is at least 8 amas. First wide line in the Gemara. But if you have a tree shetachtav is only 7 amas, And now we're going to make two groups. Now there's only 2 fours. And not even 2 complete 4 amas, because you don't even have 8 amas. You have 7 amas, which means that some of one side will overlap some of the other side. Now we accept your svarim. At least in the overlap area, we know there is your makom hashvisa. That is defined. There is some of the 4 that's defined. Oh, if some of the 4 is defined, no, the picture before was better. Okay, weiter, Pashit. Says the Gemara, you should know, Tanya Kavasa de Rav and Tanya Kavasa de Shmuel. Let's not forget Shita Shmuel. Shmuel says, I don't care that it's not defined. Shmuel says you never intended for all of under the tree to be a makom hashvisa. You never intended that. You intended 4 from any area. Since we don't know, you got to be machmer. Gesund to hate, be machmer. So as we spoke out when we learned yesterday, if your house, if you were to look at the northern part of the tree, if your house is more than 2,000 amas from the northern part of your tree, then you can't go to your house because maybe it's the northern part of your tree. Maybe on the other hand, if you want to walk to the south, then you have to measure from the opposite direction. Always, wherever you want to walk, it's your makom hashvisa is somewhere. Since we don't know, always be machmer. Where do we see this in the Braisa? Now, guys, the Braisa begins, Mamash writing the words in the Mishnah. But we'll see that at the end of the Braisa, clearly like Rav. It says in the Braisa, a person is traveling, trying to make it home. Tshuva. But the Chashchalais is finstered, and he can't make it home on time. But at least while you're marking Elon, there is a landmark. There is a tree. There's a piece of Yiddishkeit that you can connect to from the distance. There's a fence. And he says, you know what? My makom hashvisa now, if that tree or fence would be beyond 2,000 amos where he physically is, then none of what we're learning would work. The landmark has to be within your tchum. How much? Even at the limit. As long as it's 2,000 amos. And you say, but you didn't say specific. You said general. You know what? Shvisasi tachtov. Like we mentioned right now, let's go with the last sheet of Rav Huna B'Rei Rav Yeshua. It's 8 amos under the tree. Now you didn't declare which 8 amos. That can be stuck in the center, it can be in this side or in that side. Then lo yomar klum. Now what lo yomar klum means, I know that nothing is clear. The Mishnah said the same words. Shmuel said lo yomar klum, you can't make it home. Fine, but let's go back. But as long as he gave a specific part, Shvisasi bim makom ploni, defined a specific place under the tree, a specific place by the fence, then as long as that place is 2,000 amos from where he physically is, and as long as his house is 2,000 amos from that place, I'm a chaya. And if he giya lo oisamakim because he didn't go beyond 2,000 amos to get to that place, then mahalach es kuloi v'chutzala paimam. Now listen to how the Braisa, Kidarko of a Braisa, is a little bit more elaborate. Here we're adding another nuance. The Braisa doesn't say that you go from that makom another 2,000 amos in the opposite direction. The Braisa adds, mahalach es kuloi, your makom hashvisa is not even included in the total of 4,000 amos. And by the way, it's not. When we take in Shabbos in Los Angeles, we have 2,000 amos to the north of Los Angeles out of the city. We have another 2,000 amos to the south of Los Angeles, but we don't have 4 amos in the middle. The whole Los Angeles is like daled amos. So we're going into another nuance, and that is that if your makom hashvisa that you specified is in a independently defined area, defined, not verbal defined, physically defined, it's an area that has mechitza surrounding it, then all of the area that's halachically in mechitzas or in halachic mechitzas, all of that is like daled amos, as the Braisa elaborates. The Medvarim Amurim, that mahalach, the kuloi is not included in the 2,000 amos to each direction. That's if the makom is b'makom hamasuyim. Makom masuyim means that it has halachic mechitzas that set it apart from the surrounding area. For example, sheshavas betel, under the tree happened to be on a mound. Not stam a mound that halachically, right, the incline is so steep that we view all of the mound on top of mechitzas of 10 tfachim or more. And the mound itself is north, south, east, west, daladamis, or up until Beis Osayim, right? Because if it's more than that, then it's a whole din of a karpef. Then you can carry, then that is considered one area. And the 2,000 amos tchum is from sides of this area. This area is by itself, you are allowed to carry there. Or you have the opposite of a mount. You have a valley, a bika, shiamuka, but it's a bika that goes down steep 10 tfachim, and it is 4 amas by 4 amas up until 2 sosayim. Then mahalach es kulay and v'chutzalay. Aval b'makim she'ein mesuyam, which would normally be the case of the Mishnah. You have out there in the field, you have a tree. It doesn't have any partition surrounding it. So then your makim hashvisa is only dalad amas, and aside of those dalad amas, yeah, you have 2,000 amas in each direction. Atkan still no raya taraf, but let's keep on reading. Ho yushnayim. If there were 2 landmarks, 2 people are going, they're both trying to make it home. Yes, there is a landmark that's in between these people and their homes. One of them knows where it is, so he can define where his makom hashvisa will be. The other doesn't know. Is the one that's not makir, is he stuck? Says the Braisa, no, there's a solution. He appoints the makir one as a shliach. Right? You affix my resident. And as long as the shliach knows where it is, it works for the mishaleach. The hamakir oimer shvisasi the makim pliny. Shvisasi means me as the shliach. Shliach shalom kamais. Let's go weiter by medvarim amurim. That it works, a oral declaration. You don't have to be ma'arav beraglov. You don't have to put bread. That's kishasiyim. Now we have words that elaborate the resh of the Mishnah. When he clearly defined the place by the tree, the place by the gader. Kishasiyim daladama shekava. Aval loisiyim. But if he didn't clarify which dalad amas by the tree, then lo yozuz mim koimai. Not like Shmuel. Shmuel says, you can walk, but you have to always be machmer. No, lo yozuz mim koimai, which means your oral declaration did not go into effect. And now it's even worse. Since you did not want to be shoyvis physically where you are, so that's you were not koina any makim shvisa. All you have is daladamas. Now this is such a good raya. The Gemara says, well, I say lema to have it to you to the Shmuel. Amalach Shmuel no. I'll tell you what the issue is. Had he designated the trunk of the tree his makim shvisa, the tree is exactly by the limit away from where he is. Now I know we keep on saying exactly the limit is 2,000 amas. It's really not that case. It's 2,004 amas. If you have from his feet, right, ad ikara shel ilan arba trei alfa and va'arba got midday 4 amas and 4 amas. Well, and therefore what you did not specify here. If you did not specify, let's go with Shmuel. We don't know where. Maybe it's going to be in the daladamas that's even farther away from you. That means that if you taka designated your makom shvisa beyond the 2,004 amas, then you can never make it there. Your words, by the way, go into effect. Your makom shvisa is beyond 2,004 amas away from you, which means you are now outside your tchum. In such a case, you can't move. So now, kam lei labar mitchuma. And since you are outside your tchum, that's how we began the Spedic. When a person is outside his or her tchum, they have no more than daladamas. And that's why only Isiyam daladamas, if he clarified where his daladamas is, and it cannot be the daladamas that's the farthest most away from him, because that's beyond the 2004, then it wouldn't work. But as long as you designated it, here he holds like an av, then Matzi Asel, and the Eloi, then in this case, even Shmuel will be Maida. That means if there's any part under the tree that's beyond the 2004, we got to be Machmer. Maybe it's there. And if it's there, you are beyond your Tchum. And that's why in this case, you can't go at all. This Braisa has nothing to do with the Mishnah. The Mishnah is in a case where any part of the tree is still within 2004 Amas. And that's why Shmuel holds that the Tchum is effective. We don't know where. We have to always be machmer. You cannot make it home if your home is beyond the 2004 from the opposite side of the tree. Stay there, but you can use it to the max that you could. Okay, now we're going to go in the reverse. Tiny Kavasa to Shmuel. Another Braisa Fakir that will be a Shmuel, and this Lochayna will be a Kasha enough. What does it say in the Braisa? A person did not understand how an Eruv works. You only have one Makim Shvisa. You don't get to make two Makim Shvisas. Now, truth be told, we learned a few dafim ago. If a person doesn't know whether he wants to go to the shiur Torah from the city to the north or from the south, he can place two. And if you subscribe to Bereda, you can choose retroactively which one of the two you want to use. Say that. But you're only using one. You cannot have two. What happens if Tav ate of the Shtei Ruchais? Why? Why did he put to the north of where he is and to the south? Because Kededuma, erroneously, he thought that Shema Arvin the Shtei Ruchais. Or Sha'amar La'avadav, he told to his workers, he had many workers, put an Eruv. And they didn't understand. One guy put it there, one guy put it there. Tzuv Eidvali Echad, Tzuv Eidvali, and Echad Eid of all of Litzafim, Be'erech Il L'Daroim. So says the Braisa, what happens? Right, Chamor Gamo, you know what happens? We say, guys, it's 1, 2, 3. Number one of them goes into effect. Number two is, we don't know which one went into effect. So if you have a suffix as to which one went into effect, you can only walk in the overlapping area. Chamor Gamol, we learned to be explained this case. Then Mahalech Litzafin, only the max Ke'eruve L'Darim, and you can only go L'Darim Ke'eruve Litzafin. That is if there is overlap, because both of these Eruvim were not placed at the end of the 2,000 Amos, but like you have in many pictures, it was placed only after 1,000 Amos. But ve'im mitzvah olav esatchum. But if these two Eruvim were placed to the max of the north, to the max of the south, he's exactly in the center. Were he to walk one step to his right, he's going beyond the tchum of the left Eruv. Were he to walk one amma to the left, he's going one amma beyond of the right Eruv. Then liyazus mimakaymai. Now hold on, my friends. How does this contradict Rav? Very simple. The din of the Braisa is premised on one rule. He placed two Eruvim. One of them went into effect. We don't know which one. Chamor Gamo. Okay. But why did anyone go into effect? According to Rav, again, let's go with the first explanation we had today enough, and with the second. If you don't define where your Eruv is, it b'chlal doesn't go into effect. Or let's go with the other explanation of Rav. Kol she'ena b'zachar zeh, if you taka made one in the north, then the one in the south would not be effective at all. If you made one in the south and the one in the north is not effective. If we're going to hold to the rule that kol she'ena b'zachar zeh, right, kol she'ena b'zachar zeh is not an Eruv at all. So the whole Braisa is predicated on one of the Eruvim going into effect. Why? Why? Why, if there's overlap, why can you walk in the overlap area? None of them should go into effect. It was like seeing. This is a big kasha. You see clearly that even when you don't define the makam of an Eruv, it goes into effect. You have a doubt, mamish like Shmuel. So then behave, you'll have to be machme here. Here we don't say you're makel. Here we say that since we don't know, you have to, you can only walk in an area that is covered by both Eruvim. And this kasha stack is so strong that the Gemara concludes you're right. This Braisa is mamish based on the concept of Shmuel. We don't say it doesn't go into effect. We don't say since it's not b'zachar zeh how does this not refute Rav? So we pull out this trump card whenever needed. Rav Tanu Polig. Rav, even though he was from the era of the Amoraim, but he was from the era that it was that we call this the transitional era. I want you to know it's not only Rav. We have this sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, by Ilfa. We have this sometimes by Rab Chia. But it's more common that we say this by Rav, that since he was from that generation, he knew of that Braisa, and he has the koyach to argue with the whole premise of the Braisa. And according to Rav, not that Safa nor the Dorim B'chlal will be effective. But let's go into another detail. And that's back to the way we learn Pshat in the Mishnah. That if a person wants some place out there to be his Makom HaShvisa, he's basically saying, not here. So now, not he has that, nor he has here. So in all cases, he's only going to have 4 amas, based the way we learned Rav in the Mishnah, even if there's going to be overlap. And Rav Tanu Upalik, to be continued. Well, we finished early. That was good.
Yeah, Rabbi.
Great dafim. Amazing. Shkoyach, Chavra.